Welcome to this lesson on multiplying fractions. Today we're going to talk about how to multiply when fractions are involved and solving real-world problems that involve multiplying with fractions. All right, so to start off, we need to actually talk about what does multiplication actually shorten? What does it mean? What are we doing when we multiply? So we know that when you were in previous grades that you talked about multiplication and you learned that multiplication is shortened addition. So it's repeated addition that we shorten. So if I have any repeated addition, I shorten that by turning it into multiplication. So let's think of what this looks like. So let's say you have 3 times 4. Right? So what this means is that I have 3 groups of 4. Didn't want that. Sorry, didn't want that on there. There we go. All right, so this means that I have 3 groups of 4, and if I were to look at it as an addition problem, it would mean 4 plus 4 plus 4, because I have 3 groups of 4. So there's 4 in this group, 4 in this group, 4 in this group. Or we could look at it as a picture. So if you want to look at it as a picture, we could say it would look something like this. Right? So I have a group of 4 right here, and a group of 4 right here, and a group of 4 right here. So I have 3 groups of 4. We need to keep this in mind because when we look at fractions and we multiply with fractions, our answers actually end up getting smaller a lot of the times. So what ends up happening is we look at our answer and think that it's wrong because with multiplication, we are used to our numbers getting larger because we're working with whole numbers. The idea is still the same. We're still working with groups of something. So we're going to take a look at how that would work in terms of fractions. All right, so let's go to the next page. So let's think about this. What does it mean when we say 3 times 1/4? Well, we know that this means 3 groups of 1/4. If we want to draw it as a picture, it looks something like this. So we have all of these circles, and they're cut into fourths. And in each circle, we have 1/4. So here's one group of 1/4. Here's a second group of 1/4. And here's a third group of 1/4. If I were to do this just as repeated addition, I know that I don't add my denominators. I only add my numerators. So I would end up with 3/4. Okay, because there are 3 groups, and in each group there is 1/4, which gives me a total of 3/4. So again, this 3 times 1/4 is going to give me 3/4. Right? And it's doing that because there are 3 groups with 1/4 in each group. If we can really focus on understanding what the multiplication means, our answer is going to start to make more sense. So this is why, even though we have this large number, this 3, we only have 1/4 in each group. Hence the reason that we only are getting 3/4 as an answer. You can also look at it a different way, whereas if you were taking 3 and you're cutting it into 1/4 and you're only taking one of those from each group. So if you were drawing the pictures as you go, it's the same idea, but you're starting with a blank. But right now, let's keep it on repeated addition. All right, so let's try drawing 4 times 5/8. This is an opportunity for you to pause and try it on your own. So draw yourself a picture. I did mine in squares to make it easier to break apart. So I want you to go ahead and try to draw it. So you have 4, which is your number of groups, and you are taking 5/8 from each group. So go ahead and try that, and when you come back, we'll take a look. All right, so when you draw it, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4 of your objects, if you did squares, circles, whatever, and then you should have 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colored in each group. So if I have 5/8 and I'm taking that out of all 4 groups, I have 5/8 here, and another 5 is 10, and another 5 is 15, and another 5 is 20. So I end up with 20, and they're still the size of eighths, which I know 8 goes into 20 2 times. 16 minus, so 2 times 8 is 16. 20 minus 16 is 4 out of 8. So this is actually equal to 2 1/2. Again, we're taking that whole number and we're multiplying it by a fraction, so we're only taking this small part from that entire whole group. That's why our number is getting smaller. Because we're taking our pieces, and instead of having one large piece, we're taking it and breaking it into eighths, so we're making our pieces smaller, and then we're only taking 5 of those eighths. Right? So how do we do this mathematically? Well, mathematically, you make 3 into an improper fraction. So we're going back to 3 times 1/4. So I know that my numerator tells me how many we have, and my denominator tells me how many are in each group. So if I have 3 as a whole number, to turn that into a mixed or into an improper fraction, it's simply, okay, I have 3 pieces and I want 1 in each group. That way I still get to 3. Right? So 3 turns into 3/1. Any whole number is going to do that. After that, now I can go ahead and multiply. So I have 3/1 times 1/4. When we multiply with fractions, we multiply straight across. So all I do is 3 times 1, which is 3, and 4 times 1, which is 4. So my answer in this case would be 3/4. So it was the same thing as when we did the repeated addition, the 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. But now we actually do the multiplication. We actually go ahead and multiply straight across and get 3/4. So here's how it works mathematically, and over here is why it works out that way. Okay, so let's go through a couple of these problems. Again, this is your opportunity, if you feel comfortable to do so, to try it on your own, or stick with me, and then when you're ready, try them on your own. So here we go. So I have 4 times 1/3. So I have to take 4 and put it over 1 because it's 4 whole groups. So I have 4 pieces and 1 in each group gives me 4 whole groups times 1/3. And I multiply straight across and it gives me 4/3. However, that's an improper fraction, so I know that 3 goes into 4 once, so I make 1 whole group with 1 left over out of 3. So my answer to this would be 1 1/3. Again, if I look at it this way, so if I take and break these into thirds, so here's 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 groups taking 1/3 out of each. That gives me 4/3, which would be 1 whole group plus 1/3 left over. All right, let's take a look at the next one. 5 times 5/7. Now I'm not going to draw the pictures anymore. We're just going to go through the math. We turn the 5 into 5/1. And I multiply straight across. 5 times 5 is 25. 7 times 1 is 7. I know that 7 goes into 25 3 times. 7 times 3 is 21. So basically I'm doing long division, just in case you forget. 7 goes into 25 3 times. 7 times 3 is 21. I subtract and get 4. 4 is my remainder. It's how many pieces I have left over, and I'm still putting 7 in each group. And last but not least, 8 times 3/4. So I put the 8 over 1. Now here's something that we can do that will allow us to simplify our answer right off the bat. So if you're confused by this, don't worry, you don't have to do it, but I want to put it out there for those of you that are ready for this step. I have 8 and 4 that are both, and 8 is a multiple of 4. So I can take these and I can simplify them by doing 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. So now I can go and multiply 2 times 3, which is 6, 1 times 1, which is 1, and I get 6. If you're not ready for that step, it would still look like this. You'll still end up with the same answer. 8 times 1, or 8 over 1 times 3/4. 8 times 3 is 24. 4 times 1 is 4. And then 24 over 4, 4 goes into 24 6 times, so that is still 6. So again, if you can do the cross simplification, go right ahead and try that. If you're still a little confused by it, don't worry, you do not have to start doing that just yet. Okay, so we talked about what it looks like when you're working with whole numbers, so now we want to look at what does it look like when we're working with fractions. So let's take this box, and we're actually going to chop it into fourths because I have 1/4, and I'm multiplying it by 2/5. So I'm actually taking only 1/4 of my group, so I put it into fourths, and I'm actually only taking this one section of it here. So all the rest of this in here doesn't matter. We're not working with this. Okay, we're only taking 1/4 of the group. After we take 1/4 of the group, then we want to take that 1/4 and we want to chop it into fifths and only take 2 of them. So now I'm going to chop it into fifths going the opposite direction, but out of those fifths, I don't want all of them, I only want 2 of them. So we're only working with, so all of this stuff over here, we don't need it because that's not being included in our group. So I only want 1/4 of a group, okay, and that 1/4 of a group has 2/5 in it. So here's my 1/4 of a group, and then when I break it down into fifths, this part in here is all that we want. So this extra stuff over here, and actually here I'll do this in yellow, this stuff here is all that we want. Okay, so we end up with, so now these pieces, they're no longer worth 1/4 and they're not worth 1/5. These pieces are actually 20ths, because if you go through and look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 20 pieces in this grid now. So mathematically, we still do it the same way. We're still multiplying straight across. Okay, so we end up with 2 20ths, which I know can simplify to 1/10. Right? So you're only taking those parts that overlap because we're only working with 1/4 of a group, and then we're taking that group and breaking it into 5 parts and only taking 2 of them. So another way to look at that, and let me make this way bigger here. Another group to look at that, or another way to look at that without it being so confusing, because there was a lot of lines going on there. So you have 4 groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm only working with this group right here. So I'm only working with this group here, because that's 1/4. Then in this 1/4, I'm actually breaking it into fifths. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I only want these 2. Okay, so that is what we're looking for. That would be what your picture looks like. But you have to remember then, since this has all 5 pieces, then this has 5 pieces, and this has 5 pieces, and this has 5 pieces. So our pieces are no longer worth fifths or fourths, they're actually worth 20ths. All right, so let's take a look at this. 2/4. Right, so when I do 2/4, again, I have to break it into fourths. So 2, 3, and I'm only looking at now this part of it, because I'm only working with 2/4. All right, so this part over here means nothing to me, so we can actually just put a big X through it now. And then I'm taking those fourths and I'm breaking them into fifths. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, and of those 2/5, or of those fifths, I want 2 of them. So 2 from this group, 2 from this group, that's one of the fourths, and 2 from this group, and 2 from this group. So that shows me that I end up with 4, and now I know that right here, from here to here is 5 pieces, and this is 5 pieces, so there has to be 5 pieces in here and 5 pieces in here. So now this big rectangle that we have all outlined in black isn't chopped into just 4 or just 5, it's actually chopped into 20. And I only want these 4 from those 20. And I can simplify it and say that that is actually equal to 1/5. All right, so we're going to continue with this. Again, the multiplication piece of it is easy. It's understanding why it's working so that way we can move on to other things later on. That's the complicated part. All right, so steps to multiplying with mixed numbers. So the first thing that you need to do when you're multiplying with mixed numbers, okay, is you actually need to, oh, why can't I pop this up? There we go. So you actually need to change your mixed numbers into improper fractions. So convert mixed numbers to improper fractions. And the reason that we're doing this, the reason that we're converting them into improper fractions is because if you don't and you just have 3, so if I do 1, 2, and actually you can't see all of that, sorry. If I just do 1, 2, 3, and then all of a sudden just put this little 5th here, I'm not breaking it apart the way that I should be. I'm not breaking it apart evenly. So I need them to all be in 5ths, so that way they're all the same size when I start divvying them out and cutting them up into their smaller pieces. Okay, so essentially what we're doing is we're saying, okay, I can't work with 3 large pieces like this and then all of a sudden also work with one of these. Because if I cut this into 5ths, it's going to look a lot different than if I cut this into 5ths. So we're trying to make it so all of our pieces are the same size. After I've converted, I again multiply straight across. After I multiply straight across, I simplify and or convert. So what this means is if it is a improper fraction, I end up converting it to a mixed number. So as an example, so I have 3 and 3/5, and so that means I have 3 groups of 5, which is 15, plus an extra 3, which is 18, so I have 18/5. And I'm going to multiply that by, I have 2 groups of 3, which is 6, plus an extra one, which is 7. Okay, so now I'm going to do my cross simplification. So 18 and 3 can both be divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 18 divided by 3 is 6. Now if I multiply straight across, 6 times 7 is 42. Over 5 times 1 is 5. So I converted them into improper fractions. I multiplied straight across. I ended up simplifying before I multiplied, which is okay if you know the cross simplification. Now I just need to convert. It's improper. And remember, simplify and convert are 2 different things. Because converting means that you're changing the form of the fraction. Simplifying means that you're putting it into smaller numbers, but it still remains equivalent, and the form stays the same. So here I have 42/5. 5 goes into 42 8 times, with 2 left over, and 5 in each group. So now I've converted, so now I know that I'm done. My answer is 8 2/5. All right, so here we go. We are going to do this one again, and we're going to try the trick of simplifying. So if I do that, what I can go ahead and do is I can take and I can put the 4 over 1, and I convert this to an improper fraction. Oops, can you even see the 4? Nope. And 8 times 3 is 24, plus 1 is 25. I have both 8 and 4 that can be simplified by 4. Once I simplify them both by 4, I end up with 1 over 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 8 divided by 4 is 2. So now when I multiply, I end up with 25 over 2, which is 12 and a half. Otherwise, I can still leave it the way it was and do 4 over 1 times 25 over 8, which ended up giving me 100 over 8. I know 8 goes into 100, and this is where it's a lot easier when your numbers are smaller, because I have to look and say, okay, 8 goes into 10 once. I'm left with 2, bring down the 0. 8 goes into 20 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16, and I have a leftover of 4, so I get 12 and 4/8, which if you simplify it becomes 12 and 1/2. That's why I like the cross simplification. It makes simplifying a lot easier, and it makes your conversion at the end a lot easier. However, either way, you still end up with the same answer if you do it correctly. All right, so now I have a couple of problems here that I'd like you to try on your own, and I want you to make sure that you're taking your time going through them. These are going to be at the end of your notes. There are a couple more things that we are actually going to do in class, which we're going to talk about some pirates and their treasure and how it worked out, who ended up with the most. So first, though, I want to make sure that you guys can actually do the process, which is important, and then we're going to go deeper into it when you guys come back on why the process works and what actually is happening when you're multiplying by fractions. Again, drawing those pictures is really going to help you, so make sure that if you are struggling or if you're trying to explain it, draw your picture and try to explain what you drew and what happened in your drawing. As always, if you have any questions, please make sure to write them down or email me. You can also write them in your self-assessment so that way we can go over them in class.